let's just jump right into it. Is the Cy-Hawk game in danger down the road? The contract for Iowa and Iowa State for the Cy-Hawk game currently runs through 2027. They re-upped it a couple of years ago. So we know that, well, we think we know that you've got the 2025 game between these two, 2026 and 2027. And who knows, they might re-up this thing between now and the year 2027. But with some of the rumblings in college football, the college football playoff expansion, the Cy-Hawk game, could that be something that ends up in danger as a bit of that process? If you were with us last week, you know that we spent a lot of time talking about the 4-4, 2-2-1 college football playoff expansion model. And without rehashing all of that out, suffice it to say, if you get a 16-team college football playoff, that opens the door, Chris, potentially for a crossover set of games between the Big Ten and the SEC. And if and when you get to that point where the Big Ten and the SEC are crossing it over, could the Cy-Hawk game potentially be in danger? Let me paint the picture for you. You've got your 9-game Big Ten conference schedule. You know you've got that if you're Iowa. If you get the Big Ten SEC crossover, okay, there's a 10th Power 4 game that you've got on the schedule every single season. And obviously at that point, it leaves just the 2 open dates on the schedule. Conceivably, you could fill the 11th with what has been that in-state Cy-Hawk game rivalry. Or you could say, you know what? We've got enough in the way of Power 4 opponents on the schedule. And with the Big Ten 9-game conference schedule, and now with the crossover game versus the SEC annually, that's enough for us. We'd like the flexibility to go schedule an FCS opponent, maybe a lower level FBS opponent, 2 of your prototypical tune-up type games in the non-conference to go with that Big Ten SEC crossover game. And as this started percolating out there over the past week, Chris, it seemed like, and social media is not the greatest indication always of how fans feel, but it didn't seem like there was this grand pushback from Iowa fans to save the Cy-Hawk game. So I ask you off the top, where do you stand with this? Could the Cy-Hawk game be in danger down the road if you get college football playoff expansion, if you get a Big Ten SEC scheduling alliance? And how do you feel about it?
I think, there has to be a way for it to stick around. I think this is, no matter what the game is, every season, this is the one game that Hawkeye fans and Sackville fans really look forward to. And the Big Ten SEC crossover happens, and we kind of move to 10 in a sense. It does make it difficult, but you got to understand, this is one of the most important games on the schedule every single year, regardless of who's in the conference, who is playing, who's not playing, whatever. So, and this is not just about entertainment. This generates revenue. You got to think of what it does for the economy. You got to think of what it does for notoriety for the coaches, the players, to get them noticed. This is a big rivalry. That's why this year it's on Primetime Network, and you got the Fox crew coming to the game this year because it's such a primetime game. So the fact that this is supposedly in danger, it just doesn't make sense in my head. This has to stay. I love this every year. There's no reason why this should go. I understand it might be tough, but if we have to move one of those, like we got, UMass and Albany, I believe, this upcoming year, if we does move to a supposedly 10-game conference slate, we'll just call it that for the Big Ten. UMass or Albany has to go because Iowa State, they can't move. We can't get them off the schedule. It makes no sense. It has to stick around. It's been a rivalry. It's called a rivalry for a reason, and it's just good it's good all around for not just the 2 schools, but the state of Iowa and the nation as a whole. Because to see this beautiful rivalry, it has to stay, man. It just has to.
I want to see it continue as well, which at this point, it's all conjecture. We don't know that the college football playoff is going to expand to 16 teams. It feels like there's a lot of momentum for that. Again, we spent so much of last week talking about there's going to be these 4 automatic qualifiers to the Big Ten and the SEC, and that's what Tony Petitti wants, and it sounds like that's what Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, wants. And lo and behold, you end SEC spring meetings last week, and the new model that was garnering the most attention was the 5+11 model. For the Hawkeyes, if it does expand, obviously that would have to be step one. Then you'd have to get the 2 conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC, to even agree for a scheduling alliance. And at least for the moment, you technically have uneven numbers of members in the 2 conferences. You've got 16 in the SEC, you've got 18 in the Big Ten. So theoretically, Chris, I could paint you a picture where Iowa doesn't play an SEC team every single season. Obviously, it would be most seasons, and I would campaign as somebody that covers Iowa that, to me, you want to play and meet the best. I think it gives you a chance to – I think playing and beating the best gives you the best pathway to enhancing your program. I think that gives Iowa the roadmap to potentially enhancing its recruiting if you play and beat some of those powers that be in the SEC. So count me in the camp that give me the annual SEC game. We can discuss, is there an SEC opponent that you'd like to just turn into an annual rivalry of sorts? Do you just want to lock in one opponent from a regionality standpoint? Missouri would make sense in that regard. But the bottom line is, to me, I think you want an annual game versus the SEC. But on top of that, I don't think you want to lose the Cy-Hawk game with that. I think you just want both. You get one tune-up game, and if you're really good, it sets you up for the clearest path to the 16-team college football playoff. I just think the schedule strength component to it, the way that it sharpens you up for Big Ten play, I think those are greater advantages than it is, hey, let's duck and run from a challenging schedule. I know that there's some folks out there, and I'm looking at you, Lincoln Riley, with USC and the Notre Dame series. There's some that maybe don't want to take on that scheduling challenge. But to me, if I'm Kirk Ferentz, if I'm Beth Getz, if I'm Iowa, and I'm looking at the long-term future of the program, I want the Cy-Hawk game. It's a good measuring stick early in the season, and that's independent from if you get a Big Ten SEC crossover game. I want the game because I want to find out right out of the chute, what do we have after a tune-up game versus an Albany, versus a UMass, insert opponent here, you catch my drift. Plus, you look at the all-time series, Chris, and look, though Iowa led that game throughout and obviously lost it at the end last year versus Iowa State, you should feel comfortable that you win this game most of the time. You own the all-time series 47-24, and over the past decade, you've dominated the Cy-Hawk game. So to me, if we're talking about it makes your schedule so much more difficult, okay, yeah, it makes the schedule more difficult, but this is a game that you've had a lot of success in. So I think from that standpoint too, keep the game.